Let's go ahead and start with Linda and her story. I'll never forget the day that Linda called me. Linda is a marketing director. She works for a large manufacturing firm. And she had been in this position, or has been in this position, for nearly 20 years. I think it's about 18 years at this point. And she called me because her marketing budget had been cut by 35%, and she still had to reach her revenue goal of 25 million. Now, this is unfortunately very common, regardless of the economic situation. Right now, that is much more prevalent. People are seeing their marketing budgets cut left, right, and center. And this was last year. So she called me, and she was feeling very discouraged. She was worried not only for herself, but for her team. If they didn't meet their revenue goals, what could happen? And with this budget cut, she really wasn't sure how to approach her digital strategy. And she told me, she said, I am determined to hit this revenue goal this year. Despite the reduction in budget, I am determined to do this. Can you help me? And I told her, yes, we absolutely can, but it's not going to be easy. And you're going to be needing to approach your digital strategy and what you're doing in a very different way. But she said, you know what, I'm ready to take on that challenge. And so we began. So the first thing we did with Linda is we did a digital discovery. We went through all of her current channels to be able to see what was going on. And she just did a couple of interesting things. She learned which digital channels were being effective, and looking at those benchmarks and understanding what channels were working, what channels weren't. And she also saw roadblocks where her customers were having difficulty reaching her sales team. So by looking at her digital channels, she was actually able to eliminate a couple of roadblocks, which definitely helped the process. The next thing we had to look at was her reduced budget, because you know, having to still meet her $25 million in sales goal and revenue goals, she really needed to look at how she was going to use her reduced budget. And based on the data on what were her best performing channels, she was able to reallocate her budget dollars. So every penny of her budget was put into increasing quality leads in those channels that she had identified. And then with this information, we were able to create a detailed digital strategy where she had clear goals, and she would be able to monitor channels. And if one of her channels started to underperform, she could see it and she could adjust it quickly. So she had a lot of information with her data. And at the end of the year, she called me, and it was probably the happiest I had ever heard her. And she said, you know, I came this morning and I turned on my computer and I logged into Salesforce and I ran my normal set of reports. And one of my reports is closed business to date for the year. And right there in black and white, 25.3 million in sales revenue. She and her team had actually surpassed the company's goal. And that really does go to show you that data application provides the foundation for achieving revenue goals. So there we go. I knew it would catch up. So let's talk about storytelling. What I just told you was a story. I talked to you about a client and what they've done with our agency to achieve their goals. Storytelling is a universal concept. The article from Jeremy, The Secrets of Storytelling, Why We Love a Good Yarn, is actually a pretty easy read, quick read, and it really gives you a lot of information of why storytelling is so powerful. If you think about when you were growing up and you read stories at night and you went to the movies and you read books and they all shared a story about something that had happened and a moral of what you should or shouldn't do, and now you're reading those same books to your children, those types of stories really captivate the audience and they connect with them. And great storytelling will tap into the emotional side of the brain versus critical analysis. So when we talk about benefits of our products and services, we're sharing analytical information. And when we do that, our audience will look at what that means. They'll process it in a critical way. They'll compare it to other competitors, and they'll do a very critical analysis of what we're talking about. When we share the story of how our products and services have impacted our clients, that's tapping into an emotional thought process. And the solution that you're sharing is adopted much more readily because you're tapping into an emotional response versus a critical analysis. Now, what's happening right now with the economic downturn and coronavirus and everything else, Matthew Sweezy, he is a Salesforce contributor and marketing director. He just came out with a book. Fantastic guy, very, very nice. And he did a recent survey of the current marketing teams and asked them, with everything going on, how are you feeling? And across the board, whether it was a small company or a big company, the general consensus was, I'm afraid for my job. So there's already an emotional element to what's happening in decision making. And I will tap back into that as we go through. But when we think about the fact that we are watching a ton of movies at home, which I'm sure you are, as I am, and we're reading, and we've really been indoctrinated into this culture of how we share successes and things that work through storytelling. People are hardwired for stories. This is something that I'm going to be referencing so that you tap into this power. Because people are hardwired for stories, if we construct our communication in terms of a narrative, in terms of a story, we will see much better engagement and we will see a different kind of engagement. And that is what I really want to talk to you about. So let's go into secret number one. It should be obvious. We want to share stories. Instead of talking about your features and benefits, instead of having a sell sheet that lists what your product does, I want you to start thinking about how you can shape your narrative into a story. And this may surprise you, but every single type of digital engagement that you currently do ties into a narrative and a story, whether you're conscious of it or not. And that includes email, landing pages, video, even social media posts and tweets, website. Everything is driving towards a narrative, a story. Because again, people are hardwired for stories. We automatically start doing storytelling, whether we know it or not. Now, persuasive storytelling, which is what I want you to start practicing, has three key components. First of all, you identify a current problem. It talks about what the problem is. It shares a solution to that problem, and then it's short. Doesn't have to be a long explanation. It's short and it has detail, but it has detail that drives the emotional response of the audience. Now, if you're going to ask me, well, how do I know what the current problem is? You're going to ask your marketing team. When you have a conversation with them, you can ask them, what are your goals right now? What is it that you're focusing on? What are you doing that's working well? How are you achieving your goal? And then this is the last one that you really want to listen. What are your roadblocks? What are you not being able to break through in order to achieve that goal? That's how you identify their problem and how your solution will help them overcome that problem. That's secret number one. It seems self-explanatory, and as we go through, you'll see how this applies, but that's really the first one. Because people are hardwired for stories, we want to be sharing stories. That is our focus. I want to quickly take a break and see if there's any questions, any comments on the first secret of we want to get into the habit of storytelling, of sharing stories. I don't see any questions, but I just want to make sure that if anyone does have one. And if not, we will continue. And it looks like we can continue. Fantastic. So, secret number one, share stories. If you've heard me speak, you know that I like to use a process or a formula. To me, repeatability and knowing that you can have results over and over and over with a process really makes it easier. So our second secret would be a formula for you to create your story. And it's 6 steps. We'll go through the steps and then I'm going to apply it to my story about Linda so you see how I constructed my story. First, we're going to start and describe our main character. Our main character is what the story is about. It's going to be another client that you helped get where your audience member is now to where they need to go. Then you're going to be introducing your nemesis character. This is your typical or atypical villain. What is preventing your audience, your client, from achieving their goal? Then you're going to bring in your mentor character, your supporting character. The mentor is there to help the main character guide, provide tools, provide knowledge so that the main character is able to achieve their goal. You want to keep your stories character-centered. I will definitely dive more into this when we deconstruct my story about Linda. And I will talk to you about what the other type of center is. Some will follow a plot-centered story, and we can compare those two. We want to have our main character succeed because people like a happy ending, obviously. And then we want to share the moral of the story. What should our audience get out of the story that you've just shared? So let's go back to Linda and let's deconstruct. Linda is my main character, and I described her, right? She's a marketing director. She works in a large manufacturing firm. She's been there almost 20 years. So you know that she's a seasoned employee in the organization. What's her nemesis? Her reduced marketing budget. Now, there may be background problems that we don't know about, right? When I hear that she has been there 20 years and suddenly had her marketing budget cut, I mean, there could be political things that are happening in the background, a new boss that doesn't believe in marketing, turnover in her team. You know, the current situation, there's an economic downturn. We don't know. But the problem I want to focus on, which is the problem that she identified as her roadblock, was her reduced marketing budget. If we address that problem with a solution, then she can tackle any background problems that she might be having, any secondary issues. Cue the mentor character. That's going to be me. Me and my agency, we are the ones that helped her, guided her, gave her the tools and the knowledge to get to where she was, to where she wanted to go. I also focused on Linda and what she gained from the interaction, what she gained from hiring my agency to help her achieve her goal. You think about what I talked about. The digital discovery. Linda learned where her channel mixed fast. Linda discovered the roadblocks where her customers had a hard time getting through the lead process. When we talked about her reduced budget, Linda learned where to apply her marketing dollars so every single penny driven forward. Character centered. If we did something that was plot centered, the conversation would be different. And I would be talking about how in the digital discovery process, many channels were reviewed and benchmarked against current industry standards and prior historic conversion rates. And I can go into a lot of detail around the digital discovery process. I don't. And not that it's not important. It's not important right now. If I add in those plot-centric details, I'm moving the conversation from an emotional, I want to root for Linda, to a critical, well, how does that work? We want to focus on what Linda got out of interacting with us. We want to focus on how her connection with us and our solution helped her to gain something. So we always want to focus on what she gains out of the interaction. So if you think about within a trade show industry, instead of talking about how when they hired our organization, we monitored their trade show elements, and we made sure they were clean, and we made sure they got to the booth on time. That's all true, but I want you to take it a step further. Think about a client, and you can talk about how when I worked with Linda and she brought all of her assets and started working with us for her trade show needs, she discovered that she could create a new graphic for each day that could easily be switched out in her booth to give it a new look and feel. And when she did that, and attendees walked by that had been at the booth and said, wait a minute, this looks different, and they walked in, we had further engagement. She had further engagement with those people. And she was able to actually, by having multiple contacts with the individual, really move the lead generation process along. That's compelling. That's something interesting that I would want to know. I'm focusing on the character and what she gained. Not only do we want to show that Linda succeeded, we want to make it obvious that Linda succeeded. I talked about her goal at the beginning, 25 million in revenue. I identified the finish line. Then I talked about Linda achieving and seeing that she achieved the finish line. And I didn't just say Linda got 25.3 million in sales. I described her discovering that she got to the finish line. I talked about how she came into the office, turned on her computer, logged into Salesforce, ran her reports, and there it was. you can envision Linda going through this process. That's the visual detail that helps people see her crossing her finish line. And then again, I ended with a moral, right? That data application gets results. There's a couple other things that I tend to do just because I want to have repeatability and for people to understand when I say certain things, I'm cueing the audience for a story. At the beginning, I said, I'll never forget the day that Linda contacted me. That's how I start my stories. You can think of once upon a time, or once upon a time in a galaxy far, far away. You know you're about to hear a story. That I like using that cue so that people know, okay, story time, got it, I'm ready. And then when I talk about the moral, I also give a cue because I want to make sure they hear the moral of the story. Again, my comment is, it just goes to show that, and then I state the moral of what the story entails. And here it's data application gets results. I want to make sure they hear that moral because that is a differentiator for my agency. We apply data, and that data application will get results. Whatever your differentiator is, your competitive advantage, when you're talking about your story and you're creating your story, you want to make sure that your moral ties into repeating your differentiator. Because again, we want to drive that home. You will look through your case studies and you'll prepare several stories. It's what I'm actually hoping you will do. This is not something I want you to just do on the fly. I want you to actually think through different case studies and have several available so that when you're having a conversation, you can quickly pull one out and you can start it. I'll never forget the day when so-and-so called me. And then you're off to the races. And again, a simple 6-step formula will help keep it tight, keep it short, and make sure that you're focusing on the detail that will actually help you persuade to move to the next step, to get the sale, to get the engagement. I'm going to break again. I don't see any questions in the question box. I can't believe nobody has a comment or a question, or if you're just feverishly taking notes. I know this is odd or a little bit of a slant of what you normally do. And my next secret really is, if you aren't convinced you've taken the red pill, when we go through secret number 3, you will absolutely have taken the red pill, and you literally will not be able to unsee what you're about to see. The third secret will probably be the hardest to master, but it will absolutely help you to achieve your results. So I see a question, what length do you recommend? Typically your stories really should not be any more than 5 or 6 minutes. It's not a 10-minute talk. When you go through the questions that I talked about, what are your goals? What have you done right? What are your roadblocks? How have other companies gone from where you are now to where you're going? That conversation should only take about 15 or 20 minutes. It's really about quickly getting in, addressing, sharing a story, and then moving on to what the decision is for the next step. I can tell you that conversations like that, especially when you start going after bigger fish, I've had these conversations with Chris Nassetta from Hilton, Bank of America, there is a lot of information they can get out of that 15 or 20 minutes, and they know that they'll get it and they'll be able to move on. And again, if you're focusing on the right detail, your story really doesn't need to be more than 5 or 6 minutes, because you'll hit all those points within that 6-step time frame. So let's go on to secret number 3, which again I said is the easiest and most obvious step, and is going to be the hardest to master. I feel like I'm Chopin, where he used to tell his students that the last step in how they learn a piece, which is to play it legato, to play it smooth, is actually the hardest to master, which seems like it would be the easiest to do. Let's talk about the 3 must-have roles and how to use them. Now, we know that there's a nemesis, right? And there's going to be a hero and a mentor as well. So our hero is going to be our main character, our protagonist. That's who propels our story. The nemesis prevents the hero from getting what he or she wants, right? There's a block. And then the mentor provides advice, because the hero can't do it by themselves. If they could, they would do it and they wouldn't be talking to you or me. Those are the 3 roles. Our nemesis character, we will have identified already. Hopefully with the conversations that we've had, we'll be able to look at our nemesis character quickly. With Linda, it was her reduced marketing budget. Right now, it could be the coronavirus or economic uncertainty, or proving that we can get market share, or having a new boss that we believe is out to get us. Whatever the nemesis is, you'll be able to identify it. The other 2 roles that we want to look at are the hero and the mentor. We will end up choosing one of those 2 roles. I want you to start doing it in an active, conscious way. The reason being, because we're hardwired for stories, as you remember with secret number 1, when we pick a role, our audience will automatically take the opposite role in our dialogue and engagement. They may not be conscious of it, but they will absolutely take the opposite role. And I've seen this over and over and over and over. And again, once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it, and you will see it in every single engagement you have with your clients and with what you receive from other people trying to get your business. It will absolutely, the veil will be lifted from your eyes. But there's a lot of power in understanding what role you're choosing and how your audience is showing up. So let's go through hero and mentor. When we think of the hero role, like Superman, which is my cute little dog on the left. Superman comes into the movie or the comic book, and he engages with Lois Lane. Lois Lane is the damsel in distress. So when you take on the hero role, your audience automatically becomes the damsel in distress. There's several considerations with this role, and I'm not going to say that it's bad. I'm not going to put morality into this. There is no right or wrong, good or bad. There are simply choices. That's what this is. So when we show up as hero and our audience, our client, takes the role of damsel in distress, what does that look like for our audience? Well, first, the damsel in distress has absolutely no control over his or her situation. Now, when things are going well, when we're having economic boom, when we have more market share than we can manage, there's not a ton of resistance by our audience because they have control over other things. So it's not that bad. When we're in some type of economic uncertainty, and I can guarantee this isn't the first and won't be the last economic turmoil that we will experience, they already feel that they don't have control over anything. If you show up as hero and you're basically telling them, oh, you're not going to control this either, they will absolutely repel against it. It will just come off very grating. And they might not even know why, but they'll just know that they're turned off by this communication. And I was noticing that when people were showing up in my inbox and calling me, and they were showing up as hero, and I really just was grating against their message. So that's number one. Number two, heroes interact with the damsel in distress only when the damsel in distress is in peril. And they're really only sought out in one type of situation: when things are going bad. And typically, that's a very one and done deal, right? There's really only one way to go into a situation like that to save, to rescue the damsel. And because of that, it's a very short-term engagement. It's a short-term communication. They're only going to think of you and your company, if they do at all, when things go sideways. Now, I say if they do it all because think about the Justice League or Marvel Comics. There's a lot of heroes, right? A lot of people can say that they're the hero and show up. That is a role that really, whoever the hero is that's closest by or happens to talk to the marketing department, that's who may or may not get the engagement. The other consideration is that when the hero goes in to save the damsel in distress, they have to do it flawlessly. You have one shot. There cannot be any mistakes. There cannot be anything that goes sideways in that interaction. That's a very narrow way of communicating and engaging with a client. And again, I'm not saying it's bad, just it's very straightforward. I show up, I save you, I leave. Now let's look at the mentor role. That's little Yoda on the right-hand side. Or it could be Mr. Maggie, lot of mentors. It is a support role, for sure. But when you show up as the mentor, your client gets to play the part of the hero. So let's think about that. If I'm showing up as the mentor and I want my client to be the hero, and that's how they show up, I've now given them their power back, especially during economic uncertainty. That's something that they can really, really sink their teeth into. That's something that they want. And that feels good even when there's an economic boom, to be put in the role of hero. That's got some meat on it. That's a juicy role. When we show up as mentor, we also show up when the hero needs it, as the hero needs it. Now, if you think about Mr. Miyagi in Karate Kid. Mr. Miyagi saves Daniel by climbing over the fence. He tends to his wounds. He negotiates with Cobra Kai. He trains him. He fixes his shoulder and his knee. There's a lot of different ways that the mentor shows up to solve the problem. There is unlimited opportunity and possibility in that role. The other thing that I like is that it doesn't have to be perfect. If you think about mentors, mentors also have their own flaws. Mr. Miyagi has his issues with thinking about the love that he lost. There's different ways the mentor can show up in a very human way, a very authentic way, and it doesn't have to be a perfect interaction because the hero is learning and the mentor is helping the hero. And that doesn't have to be a perfect script, a perfect narrative, a perfect engagement. The other thing is that because the mentor shows up when the hero needs it, as the hero needs it, there is long-term relevancy to the mentor's role with the hero. I mean, think about Obi-Wan and the fact that he dies halfway through the first movie, and yet he still continues to mentor throughout the series. Think about that power. Think about that relevancy to your clients. Think about if your clients are constantly coming back to you because they know that you are going to provide them with the tools and the guidance to get to their goal and their solution. And again, the hero triumphs. Huge amount of opportunity and possibility and relevance. And because we're looking at what role we're choosing, and we're thinking about that our audience shows up in, we can choose really one of two ways. Now, I did say earlier that even a social media post, even a tweet, an email, you're all driving to a narrative, either in the form of hero or the form of mentor. When I think about the hero, and let's say I think about Mighty Mouse, what does he say? Here I come to save the day, right? That's a tweet, right? That's a very short thing, but that is absolutely screaming hero. Let's flip it on the other side. Let's think about mentor. Do or do not, there is no try. Again, that's also could be considered a tweet. Very short, and there's guidance. We're saving the person, we're providing information will help them achieve their goal. That goal is their problem. All of your communication, again, has written one of these two roles. And as a consequence, your audience, your marketing department, whatever department you're dealing with on your side is showing up in the appropriate role opposite you. But by understanding how your role impacts your communication and looking at what you have been choosing, you'll be able to see what type of possibility you've created for your audience on the other side. So communication is not about just throwing our features and benefits out into the universe. Communication really needs to be about how we provide value, create opportunity, and solve an issue for our audience, for our clients. And again, when we look at these two roles and we pick one, it will absolutely drive and set up the type of engagement we get back, because we're hardwired for stories. It's how we are. I want to see if there's any questions or what may have opened up for you. Anything that, yeah.
Hey, Lisa, this is Mel. I do have a question for you. Perfect. I agree with you that we're obviously all hardwired for stories, and you think about the people that we want to hang around with, right. The people that we're kind of mesmerized by. They're typically good storytellers. Yep. The thing that I'm curious is you talk about the role of the mentor and the role of the hero, and so many of us want to be the hero, especially in a sales role. How do we resist that temptation to simply try to, that we just fall in, that we want to be the hero, we want to save the day for our client, but I think what you're advocating is that we really be the mentor, so it transfers over to the client. That seems like a huge mental task for many of us. Do you have any advice?
Yes, I do. So when we look at the hero role versus the mentor role, and yes, and this is true, just so you know, this is true even with the largest of organizations. And I've had conversations with some of the largest brands in the world over the last few weeks, and some of them were actually telling me, oh no, we're absolutely choosing the mentor role. And then we talk about it, and it's clear that they've chosen the hero role, which is another caveat that can fall into this. What I would suggest in order to try to resist showing up as the hero is we don't want to sell. I know that sounds crazy. I'm asking sales teams to not sell. What I am asking you to do is to solve. If you look at how you're going to solve the current issue that your client has, you will automatically start shifting over to mentor. So let's look at, again, let's go back into the amazing amount of movies we've probably been watching. If you think about Mr. Miyagi, and you think about when he, is tending to Daniel after he got beat up, would it have been natural? Would it have been appropriate for him to start saying, I have this flyer, and I'm able to offer you 6 karate lessons for the low price of $500. And, if you purchase now, I can take off 10%. And on top of that, I'll make sure that, you have an entry into this big karate tournament at the end of the year. No, that absolutely would feel inappropriate, would feel disingenuous. It just wouldn't fit the situation that they're in. If you look at how you're solving, what you can do to help them get over their roadblock, and you shift away from the idea of selling, and again, shifting to focusing on the hero, the character, not the plot, not the details of what you do. When you start to make that shift and you start to see successes within that communication and breakthroughs, I think that will definitely help you let go of the hero role and see that there's actually more power with the mentor. Because the mentor was once the hero, and now the mentor is simply guiding the next hero to greatness. I think that's probably the best way to do it. And honestly, that's why there's a formula. You got to practice. You're going to have to do this over and over and over and over. And again, as you get better at it, as you start to see what shows up on the other side, and the other side, the type of communication you get back, it will be a positive loop, and you'll be much more inclined to lean towards the mentor versus the hero. Now, I said before that there are organizations that I've talked to that think they're showing up as the mentor, and they're actually showing up as the hero. So what does that look like? Again, one of the companies I'm talking to, they had used an analogy that really the way that they're applying it is that they think they're mentoring and they're showing up as a hero. So imagine if Superman came in and told Lois Lane, all right, well, I'm gonna give you this harness and hopefully you won't fall out of that helicopter and die. Good luck. And that's actually what they were doing. It was a hero in a very non-committal way. It wasn't even a full hero mode. And they were getting absolute pushback, and they have been getting absolute pushback, and they weren't understanding why. When we talked through that and they recognized, oh, that's actually hero mode, and I'm not even fulfilling the hero mode, no wonder why I'm really getting resistance. You certainly don't want your hero to come in and say, okay, Metropolis, here are the tools for you to save yourself. I'll just sit over here and watch. That's not going to fly. And people get very upset with things like that. But that's a very good question, Mel. And again, that's why there's a formula. And again, you have to practice and practice and practice as you become more masters around the hero role, or I'm sorry, the mentor role versus the hero role, how you're allowing your clients to become the hero. And when you do that, when things like a pandemic happen, when things like an economic downturn happen, those clients will still be calling you. They will still be interacting with you. Because again, as the mentor, your role is to help the hero remove roadblocks to achieve his or her goal. That's really what your role is, to have the hero come in to save the day and to help guide them on a path. Are there any other questions, anything else that might have opened up thoughts? Oh, I see another question, and can you start as a hero and then transfer to becoming a mentor? So one of the things that I'm sure you've heard of with individuals, with companies, they say they want an interaction that's authentic. If you start as the hero in your solution and then move into mentor role, or you've already committed to one role, and it will be harder, not impossible, but much harder for your audience to shift. If you've, and again, it's like the earlier example of they think they're the mentor and they're showing up as the hero. It's a mixed message, and there will be resistance against it, especially when you only have a short amount of time to communicate with your marketing person. You finally got them on the phone. You really want to be concise. You want to be short. You want to find out what their problem is and see how that solution can help them. If you start off as the hero and then try to shift, you'll lose a lot of the momentum that the mentor role has. Now, that being said, if you looked at your digital communication and then you're like, well, damn it, I've been showing up as the hero. Now I need to show up as the mentor. If we commit to the mentor role and we shift, again, there's going to be some resistance because you have been showing up as the hero. But when we start to shift that conversation, and instead of being X, we're now showing up as Y, eventually we'll be able to re-engage and get people on that page. But again, if they're used to dealing with you as a hero and you want to shift into mentor mid solution, that's going to be a lot harder to shift that over. I see another question. Is it appropriate to share personal stories to humanize a problem, especially now? Absolutely. The thing is, I know that you have stories of other clients who have succeeded in a similar problem. As much as people like to believe that their story and their problem is unique, I hate to tell you, but it's really not. It normally falls into one of really 6 or 7 mega story categories. And you, I'm sure, have a story that you have in your arsenal already where you helped a similar client get over a similar goal. Because if you didn't, then you probably wouldn't be in business, or you would be just starting out. So sharing personal stories, absolutely. But I'm not sharing my personal story. I am sharing a similar company's personal story. I am sharing Linda's personal story. If I talk to you about Peter and how I had already been practicing this with Peter, and 2 weeks ago, Peter called me up because, again, they're kind of in a conundrum and their budget was cut, but he knew I have to call Lisa because I know Lisa can help me solve this problem. It's not about me, it's about Peter and what Peter did and how Peter responded. So yes, absolutely, personal stories, but again, you're not the main character. You are the supporting role. I see another one. Okay, here's another question. At times like this, when we're going through a pandemic, what do you think is the most effective platform to reach our audience to help mentor and guide them? Social platforms, more personal and intimate per client. I can tell you what I've been doing and the strategies that have worked for me. And I practice this regardless, because again, as a mentor, I want to have a very specific interaction experience with each person, but I've also been doing a mix. So if you look at some of the stuff I've been doing on LinkedIn, I've been sharing thought leadership pieces. As a mentor, here are tools and techniques that you can use to help break through communication, to help show your value, especially in a time like this, to help shift your perspective. So that's a very general, everyone can use, because I believe everyone can use that. This webinar, everybody can use. And with, again, the conversations that I've had with some very, very, very large companies, everyone can benefit from taking this red pill. And then when I talk to clients one-on-one, that's again when I ask those questions. And I'm going to repeat them again and you can write them down. Number 1, what is your current goal? What is something that you're trying to achieve right now? Number 2, what have you done that has worked? What has worked well? People like to talk about the successes they've had. Number 3, what roadblocks are you currently having in achieving that goal? And then number 4, would you let me share a story with you about how a similar company to you went from where you are now to where you want to go? And then you go into your story. Let's see if I can, if there's other questions. And Mel, you might have to help me because I want to make sure I'm seeing all of these.
Yeah, I think you've answered all the questions. There's one where Carla asked, in our industry, sometimes we swoop in as a hero because a client needs a hero, but then we transition over towards the mentor long term.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you, Carla, that your client doesn't need a hero. Your client has the ability within him or herself to achieve the problem. What you want to be is the mentor that provides the tools and the resources and the knowledge and the experience and the support so that your client continues to recognize and achieve their hero status. So that's something I definitely want you to consider shifting. You don't need to come in and save them. Because again, there are a lot of companies out there that are already positioning themselves as such. If you position yourself as the mentor, where they're now becoming the hero, again, that is a much better role for your client. They will love that role. They will love you for supporting them in that role. And they will continue to come back to you because you will always be relevant to them. It's not just about saving the day in one instance. It's about providing the support and guidance that they need, whatever the problem is that comes up for them. Any other questions, thoughts?
I think that's it, Lisa. If you don't mind, if I can make a few closing comments.
Sure. Oh, and I'm sorry. Yes, and I'm sorry. I'm glad we went over. Again, 3 secrets that we talked about. I do have a quick homework assignment. I'm going to turn my camera back on. If you are willing to do this, look at your digital content and see where you are. If you were going to have someone read the lines of your content, would it be Luke Skywalker or Obi-Wan? Would it be Daniel-san or Mr. Miyagi? Just so you start to become aware of how your content is being delivered and written, the narrative in which you're sharing. And the other thing that I would share with you, if you'd like to have a conversation with me, I love it. You can see I can talk about this probably until the end of time, because this is so fascinating to me. And again, now that I've seen it, I literally can't unsee it. I see it absolutely everywhere. It's like I see all the code in the matrix. It's amazing. You can email me, you can call me, you can check my website. Do purchase my book if you haven't. This also will give you a lot of tips in how to fortify your digital growth strategies in uncertain times, which is where we're in right now. Thank you, Mel.
Thank you, Lisa. Just a couple final comments if I can. I'm going to reiterate what you said, Lisa. I absolutely agree. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it. And as you were going through your presentation, I was revisiting conversations I've had over the past couple months, not only with distributors, but outside of the trade show industry, and going through those scenarios again and thinking to myself, how could I really have put your plan in place and become more the mentor rather than the hero in those situations, and not go into a selling mode, simply go into a mentor mode. The other portion is that I would ask the folks who are out there, kind of look at your own companies, because it's not just people who fall into the roles of becoming mentors or heroes. Companies have those cultural personalities too. And if your company is a hero corporate personality, it may be worth re-examining how do you transition out of that into more of a mentor role, so that goes all through the organization itself. All right.
Absolutely. So, and if I can just add one other thing, I know we've gone over just a little bit, but when you think about shifting to mentor role, And that's the lens that you're having a conversation with. Price goes out of the window. Price is no longer a part of that conversation. Features and benefits are no longer part of that conversation. If someone sees that you can help them get through a solution, they will figure out how to get you in, how to pay for you for what you're worth, and how to continue to work with you.
All right, Lisa, thank you. Thanks everyone who attended it. If you're interested in the other webinars that we're hosting for this month, please go to the Classic Exhibits website, to the blog in particular. It has a link to all of those, because Classic Exhibits is happy to play the mentor this month and as always. Thank you, everybody.